The world was a tense place. It was 1983. The Cold War was very cold. The United States and the Soviet Union stood on edge, and both had nuclear weapons, lots of them, enough to end everything. One wrong move could trigger global war. A war no one would win. Stanislav Petrov was a man in the middle of it all. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. His job was important. He worked at Serbikov 15. This was a secret bunker near Moscow. Inside, he managed a satellite early warning system. This system was called OKO. It watched the sky. It looked for incoming missiles. If the U.S. launched nuclear missiles, OKO was supposed to see them. Then Petrov and his team would tell higher command. Higher command would then decide what to do. Maybe launch their own missiles in return. This was the idea of mutually assured destruction. It was a terrible thought, but it kept a strange kind of peace. Petrov was not a combat soldier. He was an engineer. He understood the machines. He understood the systems. He knew how they worked. He knew their strengths. He knew their weaknesses too. And this knowledge, this deep understanding would become very important. The night of September 26, 1983 was quiet at first. Petrov was on duty. He was the duty officer. This meant he was in charge. He watched the screens. His team watched them too. They listened to the hum of the computers. They felt the weight of their responsibility. Every shift was a watch against the end of the world. Then the world seemed to shift. Not with a bang, but with a sudden sharp light on a screen. The alarm blared. A loud, piercing sound. It was the highest level alarm. Launch detected. The system was saying the United States had fired missiles, nuclear missiles, heading for the Soviet Union. Petrov felt a jolt. His heart probably raced. Anyone's would. But he had to be calm. He had to be clear. He had to think. The screen showed more. Not just one missile. Several. Then 5. 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles. They were on their way. Headed right for the Soviet Union. The system was very sure. The system said it was true. Everyone in the bunker looked at Petrov. He was the one who had to make the call. He had to follow the rules. He had to report it up the chain. That report would mean war. A nuclear war. The end of everything. His hand was on the phone, his finger on the button. The protocol was clear, but something in him hesitated. Something did not feel right. He looked at the data again. He looked at the screens. He looked at his team. They were waiting. They were scared. He had to decide, and he had to decide fast. The missiles were already in the air. Time was running out. This was not a drill. This was real, or at least the system said it was real. Petrov had to trust his gut, or trust the machines. The stakes were impossibly high. Life on Earth hung in the balance. It was a moment of true terror. And in that terror, a man, an engineer, had to decide. He had to choose. He had to choose what to believe and what to do. He knew the system. He knew its quirks. He knew that sometimes it gave false alarms, but this alarm was different. It was the highest level. It was saying with all its computer certainty that the attack was happening. But his mind, his human mind, questioned it. He needed more. He needed to be absolutely sure. Before he ended the world, this was not a job he applied for to be a hero. He was just doing his duty, like many others in that time. But that duty, on that night, became something else entirely. It became the fate of billions, and he stood alone with that choice, with the blaring alarms, with the silent, terrifying data, with the phone in his hand. The decision he made, or rather, the decision he did not make, would change everything. Or, more accurately, it would keep everything from changing forever. It was a choice born from experience, from doubt, and from a deep understanding that machines, for all their power, can be wrong. And that a human touch, a human question, could be the most powerful force of all. The night of September 26, 1983 started like any other. Stanislav Petrov was on duty. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense. His job was to watch for missile attacks. He sat in a bunker near Moscow. The air was heavy. Cold War tension was high. He oversaw a system called OKO. It used satellites to detect missile launches from the U.S. Then, around midnight, everything changed. Alarms blared. Bright red lights flashed. The main screen showed launch. The system reported a missile launch from the United States. Petrov's heart must have pounded. He saw the information, one missile, then another. Then 3 more, 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles, all heading towards the Soviet Union. The computers were clear, the data was clear, the system was confirming a strike. A nuclear attack was underway. The protocols were clear too. Report it immediately. Send the information up the chain of command. That report would set in motion a devastating counterstrike, a full-scale nuclear war. Petrov was the duty officer. He had to make the call. His hand was on the phone. The lives of millions, billions, depended on his next move. He looked at the screens. He looked at the blaring alarms. He felt the immense pressure. But something did not feel right to him. He was an engineer. He knew the system inside and out. He knew its flaws. He thought about the data. 5 missiles. Why just 5? If the U.S. was going to attack, would they only send 5? He expected hundreds. A full-scale attack would not start with just a handful. It seemed illogical. He also remembered past problems. The OCO system was new. It had some bugs. It had given false alarms before. But never a highest confidence alarm like this. This was different. This was screaming attack. He had minutes to decide, maybe even less. Each passing second brought the supposed missiles closer. The pressure in the bunker was immense. His subordinates were looking at him, waiting for his order, waiting for him to confirm the attack. He made a choice. He decided not to report it as a confirmed attack. He decided to report it as a malfunction, a false alarm. He told his staff to double-check everything, to look for other signs, but there were none. No ground radar confirmation, no other data. Just the satellite system saying there were missiles. He picked up the phone. He called his superior. He told them it was a false alarm. He said he suspected a system error. This was a massive gamble. If he was wrong, if the missiles were real, he would be responsible for the deaths of millions of his own people. He would be seen as a traitor. He would face severe punishment, or perhaps there would be no one left to punish him. He waited. The tension was unbearable. For long, agonizing minutes, he waited for something else to happen. For the confirmation of a real attack. For the missiles to hit, but nothing happened. The world stayed silent. No explosions, no blinding flashes. Eventually, the all-clear came. The supposed missiles vanished from the screen. The alarms stopped. It was indeed a false alarm. The system had malfunctioned. It had mistaken sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. A rare alignment of satellite orbit and sun angle had tricked the computers. Petrov had been right. His gut feeling, his human doubt, had overruled the machine's certainty. He had disobeyed the strict protocol. He had decided not to trust the computers, and in doing so, he had saved the world from nuclear war. He took a massive personal risk. He chose to believe in the unlikeliness of the attack rather than the certainty of the machine. It was an act of quiet courage, an act that prevented global catastrophe. The reason Stanislav Petrov disobeyed orders that night was complex. It wasn't just a sudden whim, it came from a deep understanding of the system he managed. And it came from his human intuition. He was an engineer. He knew how the OCO satellite system worked. He knew its design. He knew its limitations. When the alarms went off, the system showed 5 missiles. 5, not hundreds. This immediately struck Petrov as odd. If the United States were launching a first strike, they would use many more missiles. They would try to overwhelm Soviet defenses. They would try to destroy all targets. A limited attack of just 5 missiles seemed unlikely. It did not fit the expected pattern of a nuclear war. Petrov thought, you don't start a nuclear war with only 5 missiles. He also knew the OCO system was new. It was still being developed. It had some known issues. It was prone to false alarms. Though none had been as high level as this one, he knew the system had been deployed quickly. It had not been fully debugged. This knowledge was critical. He knew machines could make mistakes. Even very advanced machines. Another key piece of information was missing. The OCO system was the first line of defense. It used satellites to see launches. But there was a second-line ground radar. Ground radar stations would confirm any launches seen by satellites. On that night, the ground radar showed nothing. No confirmation. This made Petrov even more suspicious. He reasoned that if missiles were truly coming, both systems would see them. The absence of ground radar confirmation was a strong signal to him that something was wrong with the satellite data. He also had a moment of clarity about human behavior. He imagined what would happen if he reported a confirmed attack. The Soviet leadership would be woken up. They would be told that missiles were coming. They would have very little time to decide. Under extreme pressure, they would likely launch a counterattack. The human reaction to such news, he believed, would be to retaliate immediately. There would be no time for deep analysis. It would be an automatic response. Petrov made a human judgment call. He decided to wait. He decided to call it a malfunction. He reported it as a suspected false alarm. This was a direct breach of protocol. The rule was clear. If the system reported an attack, he was to report it as an attack. No questions asked, no delays. His decision put him at enormous personal risk. If he was wrong, if the missiles were real, he would be responsible for failing to warn his country. He could have been executed, he knew this, but he still chose to doubt the machine. His experience played a role too. He had been in the military for years. He had seen systems fail. He understood the complexities of these warning systems. He had a technician's critical eye. He looked for logical consistency in the data, and the data from OCO on its own lacked that consistency. Petrov's decision was a lonely one. He didn't have much time to consult, he couldn't convene a committee. He had to trust his own reasoning, his own skepticism, his own understanding of what a real attack would look like, and his understanding that even the most sophisticated technology is still fallible. He chose to bet on human reason, on a gut feeling, over the definitive output of a powerful computer system. He chose to question rather than to blindly obey, and that choice made all the difference. After Stanislav Petrov made his crucial decision, the immediate aftermath was not one of celebration or praise. Far from it. When it became clear that the alarms were indeed false, there was relief. But for Petrov, it also brought scrutiny. He had disobeyed orders, he had not followed protocol, and investigation began. High-ranking officers questioned him. Why did he not follow the rules? Why did he report a malfunction instead of a confirmed attack? Petrov explained his reasoning. He talked about the low number of missiles. He talked about the lack of ground radar confirmation. He spoke of the system's known flaws. He received a reprimand, not for making the wrong decision, but for not accurately filling out the logbook. For a minor administrative error. The Soviet system did not like public failures or deviations from protocol. His actions, while ultimately correct, showed a flaw in the system. It showed that the system could give a false alarm. And it showed that a human had to override it. This was not something the Soviet authorities wanted to highlight. So the incident was quickly hushed up. It was a secret. Petrov's actions were not shared with the public. He was not hailed as a hero. In fact, he was essentially demoted. He was reassigned to a less sensitive post. He left the military not long after, in 1984. He left quietly. He went back to a normal life. The personal toll on Petrov was heavy. The stress of that night stayed with him. He had faced the end of the world. He had carried that burden alone, and then he faced criticism for how he handled it, even though he had been right. He suffered a nervous breakdown not long after the incident. He developed health problems, including pneumonia, which he linked to the immense stress he had endured. He never spoke much about it at the time, not even to his wife. He kept it to himself. It was a secret he carried. The weight of knowing what could have happened and what he had prevented must have been immense. He lived in obscurity, just a regular guy going about his life in a small town outside Moscow. The world had no idea what he had done. The world continued on, oblivious that it had been just minutes away from nuclear war. Petrov went to work, came home, raised his family. He was just Stanislav Petrov, an ordinary man who had in one extraordinary moment kept the world from destroying itself. His commanders, while they didn't praise him, didn't punish him severely either. They understood the situation. They probably recognized privately that he had done the right thing. But the system did not allow for that kind of public recognition. The system needed its protocols to be followed. And it did not like to admit its own fallibility. So Petrov was quietly pushed aside. His bravery, his judgment, his decisive action remained a secret for many years. It was a quiet end to a world-saving night. He simply faded back into everyday life, carrying the secret of a world he saved, but a world that didn't know it. Years went by. The Cold War ended. The Soviet Union broke apart. Still, Stanislav Petrov's story remained a secret. He lived a quiet life in Fryazino, a town near Moscow. He was just an ordinary pensioner. No one outside a small military circle knew what he had done. Then, in the late 1990s, the story finally came out. It was because of General Yuri Votentsev. He was Petrov's former commander. Votentsev was getting old. He decided to write his memoirs. In them, he revealed the incident of September 26, 1983. He talked about Petrov's critical role. The news spread slowly at first. It reached the West. People were stunned. The world learned that it had been so close to nuclear annihilation, and it learned that one man, by disobeying orders, had stopped it. Petrov was surprised by the attention. He never saw himself as a hero, he just saw himself as doing his job. He often said, "I was just in the right place at the right time," or "I just did my work." He always downplayed his actions. He said he just followed his common sense. And he said he was not a hero, but the world saw him differently. Organizations dedicated to preventing nuclear war reached out. They wanted to honor him. In 2006, he traveled to the United States. He was honored at the United Nations in New York. He received an award. People called him the man who saved the world. He received more awards later in Germany and other countries. There was a documentary film made about him called The Man Who Saved the World. This late recognition was important. It brought attention to the dangers of nuclear weapons. It showed how easily a mistake could lead to catastrophe. It also showed the importance of human judgment. Even with the most advanced technology, a human mind is still needed. A human mind to question. A human mind to think critically. Petrov's story teaches us many things. It shows us that technology is not perfect. Systems can fail. They can give false information. It teaches us that relying too much on machines can be dangerous. We need humans in the loop. Humans who can reason. Humans who can doubt. His story also reminds us about the constant threat of nuclear war. Even after the Cold War, these weapons still exist. The systems that watch for them still exist. The risk of an accidental war triggered by a machine error remains. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017. He was 77 years old. He lived long enough to see the world acknowledge his actions. He lived long enough to be recognized not as a defiant soldier, but as a man of great courage and clear thinking. His legacy is not just about one night. It's a powerful lesson. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of bravery is to question authority. To trust your own sense of what is right, even when everything else tells you otherwise. It's a testament to the power of human intuition over cold, hard data, and it's a stark warning about the razor's edge we live on, where one person's common sense can literally make the difference between peace and global destruction. He was an ordinary man who faced an extraordinary moment, and his quiet decision echoed through history, ensuring there was still a history to echo through.